Every Thursday at around this time, we speak to Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He is a former White House advisor, former national security editor for Breitbart News, current Fox News contributor, and best-selling author. His forthcoming book, Why We Fight, is available for pre-order now. And Dr. G, normally we talk about national security stuff. Thankfully, the world seems to be in relative order compared to our domestic politics. So I want to start there, and then we'll get your thoughts on some other things that are happening around the world. But this New York Times op-ed anonymously posted by a deep stater and someone who is inside of the West Wing. You were inside the West Wing, and I'll tell you, as I already mentioned on the show, I'm old enough to remember when I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said there is this thing called the deep state where there are people who are permanent members of the bureaucracy who think they know better than the deplorables, who have gotten their way into the White House and are trying to undermine and sabotage this president and his voters from within. We were called crazy for saying such a thing. Also, on the flip side, and you're a little bit more of a unofficial spokesman for the president than I am, that I've been critical of some of the White House personnel, and I've taken crap for it. I've lost some access to the White House because of it. But there's a bit of vindication there, too, because clearly there's some really bad people in the West Wing, and they're hurting this president and his voters.
Yeah, so let's start by saying if this is true, then this is a national security issue. So this is a topic that we should be discussing. But let's start with I have two reactions to this, and I've already made it clear. The first one is your very sound analysis that you gave about half an hour ago. If you read this article, there is nothing new in it. There's no inside scoop. And given the New York Times' reputation over the last few years, I strongly suspect this is just garbage. It's just written by somebody who doesn't even work in the White House.
Wow. That is big. Yeah. So that has been the most common call, Dr. G, and we've taken as many calls, and you know it's a caller-driven show, and you've helped me with it for so many years, but we've taken as many calls as we can possibly take, and that has been the most common theme is people are just not buying it, and I kind of do buy it only because the New York Times is betting so many chips on this. I do think that it would be such a huge blow to their reputation. And I'm not saying that in jest. I know a lot of people are probably laughing at me, and that's fine. They can laugh at me for that commentary. But I think that this is such a big bet by the New York Times that it has to be real.
It's a big bet, but they're not acting. None of these people are acting rationally. I mean, they are in a fever dream for the last 460 days. So you're right. I mean, this could crush an organization if it turns out to be false. But as you yourself said, there's nothing in it.
There's nothing new in it. You're right.
Truly big to being a senior individual. Now, let's go to the other option.
Sure.
If it is somebody in the White House, then this is the definition of sedition. You just look it up in the Merriam-Webster's right now. Sedition is a crime. It is the overt or covert attempt to undermine a lawful authority or a constitutional order. If you disagree with the president, you are not elected to undermine him.
That's right.
I was a politically commissioned officer of the president. My job was to be loyal to his agenda and to his policies. If you don't like them, you resign and you leave. If you actively admit to being, quote unquote, a part of the resistance inside the White House, you are committing sedition, sabotage, and subversion. This person should be rooted out. I do not. If this person exists, I do not want to be in their shoes because I know right now a 4-star Marine Corps legend is on this person's trail like a bloodhound. And
wow.
They will be removed from their position.
Okay, so your White House sources are superior to mine at this point. We have decent access at Breitbart, but relative to you, you're a former White House official. It doesn't compare. And I'm heartened that you agree with me that there is nothing new in here. And perhaps this is not something that suggests some sort of huge level of dysfunction inside the White House, though I do think that it's clear that there's some level of dysfunction. I think it's good to know. But what is being discussed? Do you have any insight on what's being discussed in terms of how the White House plans to deal with it? Because I'd love to see a cleaning of house, and it'd be even more epic if the president used what whatever legal means available to him to try to weed out some of these people and perhaps hold them accountable publicly?
First things first, given everything we've just said, as we're working through this issue, you know what the most likely scenario is, Alex?
What?
I think this is some disgruntled little peon who makes photocopies in the Eisenhower Executive Building. This is some, pussy hat wearing snowflake who was left over from the Obama administration. This is their attempt at a moment of glory to satisfy their overinflated view of themselves. And the New York Times has painted this as a senior official. I think perhaps that's the most likely scenario. This is a no, because your point remains. There is nothing in this letter that speaks to this person being a senior member of the administration or being.
Yeah, the other thing is, how does the New York Times, assuming that this is the other confusing thing to me about we understand the New York Times motivation, particularly the opinion page, is to undermine this president. But right. it's to have them label this person a senior administration official and not let on even one detail that you would need a senior level of access to the president. Not even have a single detail in the entire piece, which is an anonymous piece. So breaking their typical journalistic protocol here to publish it anonymously, and not even have one detail that suggests this person has heightened access. I used to think senior administration officials was a list that was about 3 or 4 names long. And I don't think it's any of those people who wrote this article. And go ahead.
There's about 15 APs, or at least there were at the beginning. That's assistants to the president, so that's the rank of John Bolton, Steve Bannon. I mean, there's a dozen, or there were a dozen of those. And then deputies at my rank, so deputy assistants to the president, there's about 45. So there's only really 60 people. If you exclude cabinet members, this is not a cabinet member, there's only about 60 people in an office of hundreds. Because the NFC alone was 420 people when we inherited the White House. So there's only about 60 people who have the right to call themselves senior government officials, senior White House officials. And I can tell you, I can't go into names, but I can give you lists of articles where they quoted senior government officials. And we found out who they were. And these were nobodies. These were peons. These were inherited GS employees who never had a political commissioning statement from the president, never swore an oath, of a senior government official. So yes, this is the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post standard. They invent senior government officials who really are nothing of the sort.
So, Dr. G, and this is something where I don't even know if you've given this a ton of thought, but I'm curious because I would love for this president to succeed, and it's a blessing that I work at a outlet where I'm allowed to say that. And whereas the New York Times, which is trying to crush the president at every turn, lies to you, and CNN the same, doesn't acknowledge that's their goal. I would like to see the president be a success. And I would like for the president to be able to recruit better people, because I do think that with a handful of exceptions, the White House is loaded with people who are either not competent or do not have the value system that we, the deplorables, have. And I would like to see a greater balance in favor of people who actually want the president to get done what he wants to get done. And again, I'm not trying to make blanket generalizations. I have to do it for the sake of time. But the point is, Dr. G, how does the president start recruiting? Is he able to get smarter people? Because part of the climate in D.C. now, it's so toxic to be an administration official. You get attacked unmercifully. You've been through it. You're one of the nicest guys around, and you're treated as if you're a literal Nazi, Dr. G. And so why would people want to sign up for this? You have you're a great communicator, and you have blessings in that regard. But what about normal people who just are smart people, who are well-meaning, who would like to help the president? How does the president get more people like that to surround them?
Yeah, as my good friend Chris Blunt, who has the superb morning show here in D.C., says, decent people, why would a decent person want to go into government? I mean, this is the challenge. I mean,
it's a huge challenge.
As a conservative, why would you? When, in my case, the Huffington Post and everybody else is prepared to attack my mother, my teenage son, you name it. I mean, this is really a disincentive to serve your nation. But this is why the president is so amazing, that he is taking all the heat because he believes in the MAGA agenda. So to answer your question, number one, look, we have a security system that after the election for the next 3 months, there's something called transition. So you are officially part of the winning candidate's transition team, and you're prepping for the takeover of the White House and government. And I made a very simple argument. I was working for General Flynn in the NSC transition team, and I said, look, the NSC is a disaster. It was 55 people under Eisenhower. It's now 420, and most of them are people who are deep swamp creatures. Fire almost everybody.
Yeah.
And we will have a tough time. We'll have to fill it with people who, maybe don't have 20 years in government, and it'll be creaky for about 6 or 9 months. But we'll bring people in from the campaign. We'll bring in real, what did Steve call them? Hobbits. We'll bring in people.
Yeah, the hobbits,
loyal,
right? On the Shire,
right from the Shire. We'll put job postings up in the Shire, and we'll at least have people who believe in MAGA who can learn on the job. I was overruled. I don't know if it's fully factual what Steve said in one of his interviews after he left, that 48 hours in, we decided to smoke a peace pipe with the bureaucracy, and I don't know if it was that conscious a decision.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the inside baseball is this, Alex. I was in transition. The transition offices, which are about 2 blocks from the White House, that are provided by the government after you win the election. We must have sifted through 7,000 resumes. And we did the work. In about 3 months, we came down with a really good list of people that we could slot in straight away, that had shown their commitment, shown their belief in the MAGA agenda. And as soon as we got to the White House, and this is not a joke, that list literally disappeared. It was nowhere to be found. We started from scratch. We started collecting resumes again. And then the swamp dwellers and the former Bushites were the first in line. And that's in large part where we are today. And this is why it's incredible that the president has achieved what he has achieved in the last 19 months, despite only being surrounded by a handful of true believers and those on the outside who are supporting him. So, yeah, this remains an issue, but the results speak for themselves. But it is something that needs to be fixed, absolutely. And I fully, there's lots of people who put everything on the line, volunteered day in, day out to get this man elected, and they weren't shown the due recompense once we won the election. And that is something that still has to be rectified, Alex.
And it's not something, Dr. G, that we can talk about too long and too often, but it is worth noting that this is by design. This is part of the Democrat media complex, along with the deep state media complex,
GOP
which is now
Democrat media complex.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Establishment media, perfectly correct. Thank you for the correction. Well noted. This is about both establishments, and it used to be the process was you go in, you try to serve the current administration. Maybe it's good for the ego. Certainly not going to be great for the pocketbook, but then you will get out and you will get a high-paying job, a high-powered job, something a little cushier, and that was sort of the unspoken rule in Washington, and it would incentivize people to leave jobs where they were getting 7, even 8-figure salaries to come in and serve for a while. There would be a financial payout at the end, which is perfectly fine with me as a capitalist. And now they're making it so that they're trying to take that away. They're trying to make it so that if you help this president, you are ruined personally, you are ruined professionally, and that's going to make the next generation of young, smart MAGA people say, I'm just going to stay silent, because every tweet I sent when I was 17 is, go ahead.
It's very bad for the Republic.
It's bad.
It's very bad for representative government. But there's also this other facet, and it's not as strategically relevant, but it's also so strange I have to comment. I mean, you can't look into another man's soul. Only God can do that. But I know for a fact there's one person who's at the rank that I had, which is a pretty senior rank, who's still in the White House, who was a member of the GOP machine, who's still there, and he has full and utter disdain for the president. I don't think he's subverting him actively, but personally over beers, he has disdain for this president. And Alex, I don't know, how can you accept the job to work for somebody you don't respect? Maybe I'm just, made of different material, but just
well, we got we got a huge explanation for that in this piece, assuming the piece is written by an actual administration official. Is they went in because they think they know better than Trump and you and me and the deplorables, and they can save the country. They can save our democracy by, ironically, undermining our democracy and our democratic process.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so Dr. G, thank you for this. This has been a very informative thing, and we haven't got a chance to talk about national security as we normally do. But I have to get your thoughts on the John McCain funeral. I thought this was a disgrace, and I really tried on the show to be utterly fair in my analysis of John McCain, who I noted that he was a maverick in the sense that it was unique how often his political instincts were wrong. He was one of the guys who somehow managed to pick the wrong side of virtually every political fight, going down to Obamacare, getting his clock cleaned by Barack Obama electorally. He was for amnesty until his last moments in the Senate. The Keating Five, McCain Feingold. I mean, the list is it's terrible. His record as a politician was terrible. His record as a war hero was amazing. Physical courage that is hard to parallel at this point. I tried to be perfectly fair about it. And then you have this politicized funeral where you're seeing the establishment, the globalist elite, all come together to subversively attack the seated president, democratically elected. I was blown away. I was frankly surprised. I was surprised. But your thoughts?
Yeah, I try to hold myself to the rule that say only nice things or nothing about the dead. But as I wrote in I think it was The Hill yesterday, there's that British film, was it Four Weddings and a Funeral or whatever it is?
Yes. Yeah.
There's two funerals and a hearing, and you look at the Aretha Franklin funeral, you look at the McCain funeral, and you look at the Kavanaugh hearing that's going on right now, and it's a watershed moment because we didn't just bury Senator McCain, we buried any pretense that the left really means what they say when it comes to being bipartisan. I lost both my parents very close to each other. They weren't famous politicians. My father was, mildly active in politics. But the idea that I or any of the guests I invited to that funeral would stand in a position of having to give a eulogy, but use that to take pot shots against an individual who 60+ million Americans chose as president, it's worse than unseemly. It's galling, it's pathetic, it's shameful. It does a disservice to Senator McCain himself. And
I think so too.
Actually,
right.
And the great irony, and others have pointed it out far more eloquently than I have, but the great irony that you're lambasting somebody in the name of being bipartisan, whilst at the same time being more partisan than is possibly imaginable because you're at a funeral using it for political purposes. It tells you one thing, Alex. These people, and I mean the left, whether it's the Reverend who talked about despots at Aretha Franklin as a service, or whether it's those who spoke at McCain's funeral, these people, it's not that they don't have self-awareness. It's in the negative. I mean, it's in the z-axis of the graph, how absolutely unaware of their own demeanor and what their messaging to the world is. I've never seen it before. I mean, toddlers at the age of 18 months have more self-awareness than the people who spoke at those funerals. Or Kamala Harris, I counted it yesterday. Kamala Harris interrupted the chairman of the committee holding the session for the interview of a nominee to the Supreme Court of the United States, interrupted the chairman 12 words into the hearing, interrupted Senator Grassley before he could even say the word, "Welcome, Judge Kavanaugh, to this hearing." These are the people who are going to lecture us on democracy and
Right,
bipartisanship.
and civility and all that. It's so nuts because, Dr. G, we always had it. I'm sure you remember this from your days at Breitbart. We had an attitude of not to let people get into our domes, like not to let any bad press or lies or attacks, not to let it cloud our thinking, and to try to think soberly and rationally through complex issues. And yet this entire deep state establishment complex that we've got with the media, they all allow for this president to get deep inside their dome, and they announce it to the world on a daily basis. And this is, I guess, congratulated now, which is it's so strange. It's such a departure of what I was told how adults are supposed to behave.
No, you're absolutely right. And we can comment on it. We can point out that the emperor is naked, but we have to be thankful, really, because they've unmasked themselves. They've come out of the closet for the hypocrites that they are. And I really think, I'm an American now, a proud American. As such, my default setting must be an optimist, because that is the American way. And I think it's going to reap a massive dividend for the lovers of the founding principles this country was based upon when it comes to November. I think the average American sees all of this. They look at the New York Times op-ed piece. They look at the Washington Post celebration of the resistance sleeper cells. They look at the circus, the utter circus that the Democrats have been orchestrating on Capitol Hill. And they just say, this is why we elected Donald Trump. And I think also the other point is it's actually going to bring over fence sitters. I agree with Steve on this, Steve Bannon. I think there's 20% or more of the Bernie voters who are also going to say, man, oh man, is this all broke? And you know what? Donald Trump may be the man to fix it. So keep on unveiling yourselves for the rank hypocrites you are, because at the end of the day, it will help us who love this country to heal it.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, pick up Why We Fight, available for pre-order now. He's a Fox News contributor, former Breitbart national security editor, and all-around MAGA advocate. Thanks, Dr. G.
Anytime. God bless you and the listeners. Thank you, Alex.